This will unlock the St. Louis Blues as insiders reveal the perfect candidate that Doug Armstrong and the St. Louis Blues must target heading into this year's free agency that will do more than just unlock this team. But not only that, we're going to touch on one of the St. Louis Blues' top prospects and how this has major implications on him heading into next season. We have so much to break down in this episode, and you're not going to want to miss it. Before we get into that, if you're part of the 86.6% watching this and you're enjoying this daily NHL news or St. Louis Blues news, make sure to go down and hit that subscribe button. It's completely free. It helps us out a ton. And in return, we'll give you updates from all around the league, including free agency, the draft, anything you can think of, you can catch right here on Hat Trick. But with that, Darius, we got up straight into the first topic today, where we do know the St. Louis Blues have just about $5 million in cap space going into this year's free agency. Looking at this, they do need to make some rooms. We know there's a couple key guys that we're going to touch on, but overall, we see an article coming out looking at one player for each team that they should target heading into July 1st. This article is going to be down below, so go check that out as well. But we do see Jimmy Rutherford in this article say that this club could just secure itself a reliable veteran center such as Granlund. It would serve the Blues well because he'd be much better and deeper down the middle. Now, overall, what is your thoughts on Mikael Granlund being a guy that a lot of reports are saying would be the perfect fit for the St. Louis Blues?
Well, one of the most, I think, underrated, not only players, but centers around the league. You can see his point totals the last couple of years, some of his advanced analytics that is flying out there on Twitter as well, or X, really speak for themselves. He's a great player, and he was putting up pretty incredible numbers with a really bad San Jose Sharks team. And I know that, they were bad. They were a little bit fun to watch, and they got some young players, but at the end of the day, they were horrible, and they finished last. So not a great or ideal situation for a player to put up that many points, but he was still very impressive there. Then obviously at the deadline, gets traded to Dallas. He was really good for Dallas. He scored a hat trick in the playoffs in one of the games for the Dallas Stars. So this would be a guy that I think would really lengthen the lineup for the St. Louis Blues. He would add some veteran experience as well. This is a guy who's been around and in the league for a long time. And not only that, he's not going to cost too much. So he can come in and play maybe third line center, something like that. You can experiment with the lines, right? Nothing's set in stone right now. They do have a lot of contracts signed heading into next season, which is really good. A luxury that not too many teams have. And a lot of teams are going to be doing some really weird and dumb things this summer. So they do have a luxury in that way, but you can experiment with the lineup. But I think bringing a guy like this in at a cost, like he's a very cost-effective option for what he brings to a lineup. So I think it could make a ton of sense for this team. But the only thing is, and we're going to get to it in a second, Mark, is they're going to have to make some type of move. You still have a few players that you do need to sign. I feel like if you are going to get Granlund, there's a couple players you could let walk who are both RFAs and UFAs, but you still have to sign a few players, and I would imagine that Granlund's going to eat up more than what they have remaining in terms of salary cap space. So we'll get into that, but they're going to have to make a move if this were to work. But I think it's something they should absolutely take a look at.
Because, I mean, the big thing with Granlund, we know he's projected. Shout out to ScotiaStat. Go check them out as well. They do all projections at $5.4 million. Granlund, 33 years old, 22 goals, 44 assists for 66 points. The big thing that not a lot of people might notice with Granlund is his impact not only on the ice. We've seen him go out and put up 60 points. We've seen the splits between a terrible San Jose Sharks team and a very good Dallas team. You can pause and look through it as well. Consistently good on the faceoffs, just under 50%. Going to Dallas, going up to 60 on low numbers. But the big thing is his impact on young guys within an organization, the lineup. We've seen how much he meant to the San Jose Sharks organization when he played there just this last season before trade deadline. Bringing Granlund in, he would be the perfect stopover at that third line center spot. You can move him to wing if you wanted to experiment a bit, but I do think there is a big fit. You have a lot of young guys. Snuggerud, Neighbors, Holloway are still all young guys. Bolduc, these guys can learn from experienced veterans, guys that can come in and teach more than just passing and stuff. I think it's a perfect fit, but my big thing there is, if you sign someone like Granlund, would you expect him to maybe jump into that top six on the wing? Or could you see a world where he plays third or maybe even second line center with the organization?
Well, the thing is, if he's playing third line center, he's going to play that role very well, I think. But you're not going to get that much point production out of him. Maybe you will, but I think that he has a higher ceiling than that. So maybe you can move him to the wing. But that's kind of the reason I think he's a good move, is because he is a Swiss Army knife in that way, and he's a very cost-effective option in that way. So he can play the wing if you need him to play center, especially in the playoffs. If there are injuries, he can do that. So I feel like this is a really good move for the St. Louis Blues. So, and like you said, he was such a big part of that San Jose Sharks team. And I feel like him bringing in some leadership qualities can't really be overlooked either, because Nathan MacKinnon came out this year and said that he does not believe you can win in this league with a young team. And what do the St. Louis Blues have? A pretty relatively young team, right? And a lot of guys who are coming up. One we're going to touch on in just a second, but they have a lot of guys that are going to be the difference makers that are on this team that are relatively young. And Granlund's a guy who's been in the league for quite some time at this point, and I feel like he can bring a lot of that to the table. We're seeing what Brad Marchand, I'm not saying he's going to be Brad Marchand, but you see what Brad Marchand, an older guy in this league, is doing in this year's Stanley Cup Finals. So, I think that part of it can't be overlooked either. And again, like in terms of point production, he can play on the power play if you need him to, maybe a second unit with this group, and maybe he can be bumped up to the wing when you need some scoring, and he can play third line center for you as well. Maybe even second line center. Like, I know Braden Schneider is great on that line, but if you want more scoring out of it, we know what Schenn can bring defensively as well at times. And obviously in the playoffs, he's, a player that you really want in your lineup. So they can really play with things. And I think that's a reason why you go after a player like this. Not very one-dimensional in terms of, his offense or defense, and obviously where he fits into a lineup.
And I mean, the big thing is, listen, we touch on it. You're going to have to make some moves. We know this team right now, $5 million in cap space. Heading into July 1st, you have some key guys on the lineup. Vasquez was great during their run in the first round, which we really wish they made it to the second round. Blues fans, I know you feel the same with that as well. But looking at this, Vasquez, a guy like Ryan Suter, and even Joel Hofer are guys that need to be extended. We know there's rumors flying around. A lot of fans are calling for some players to be moved out, especially on defense. But looking at the lineup, Darius, we know this is a deep Blues team. They have a lot of young talent. Looking at the projected lineup, looking at players throughout the organization, Snuggerud stepping up and looking like a legitimate top six guy. With this team, would you be fine moving on from Vasquez, letting him walk into July 1st into free agency? Would you move on from maybe a defenseman to spend that money on someone like Granlund? Or do you think they should keep ship and almost just stay in the direction they're going at the very moment?
I don't think they're going in the wrong direction, but I feel like you can upgrade in some areas. So I know a lot of people are going to disagree with this, but yes, to answer your question, I would move off some of these players, because you're going to have to if you want to sign a Granlund, for example, right? And I think there's going to be some surprises that are actually coming this offseason for most teams. A lot of insiders are saying that the period between the Stanley Cup being awarded and the draft is going to be absolutely insane. It's going to be a war zone, and there's going to be a lot of trades and weird things going down. So I feel like, Armstrong does have something up his sleeve at this point in terms of that, but maybe it is just, moving or letting a few players go that some people wouldn't have expected, and then bringing in a guy like Granlund, because again, I think you're upgrading first of all, and he can play in a bunch of different roles. So it just makes sense to me. So to answer your question, I know a lot of people are going to disagree with that. I'm curious to hear what people want done and their feelings on it. So let us know in the comments below for sure. But I think you're upgrading.
And I mean, just to touch on this quickly, we know the biggest thing is at the center position, they have Dvorsky coming up, who's looking like an absolute stud. We've seen him in the AHL. We've seen how productive he is, actually named to the top prospect team in the AHL as well as one of the best future NHLers coming out of the American Hockey League. Just throwing it to you quickly, Darius. Do you think if you sign Granlund, I think there's two good options with this. You bring Granlund in, you let Dvorsky continue to develop. It's almost a stopover type player until Dvorsky gets up, takes his role. We see Granlund get a little older and gets pushed into retirement a tiny bit. But would you be worried that maybe Dvorsky gets ready faster than he should be? Then you're stuck with Granlund trying to figure him out, because I kind of think it's still the perfect fit, even if Dvorsky makes the lineup.
It is, and there's a couple reasons for that. And I think that, one of them is, first of all, we've been very high on Dvorsky on the channel, saying that he could make the NHL sooner rather than later. And a lot of people do disagree with that and that he needs more time. But listen, I had a chance to watch him live in the OHL, and the stats don't even speak for themselves, honestly. Like, he was just dangerous every time he was on the ice. And yes, he did have a pretty dominant year that year in junior, and he had a great year in the AHL, like you mentioned. It has translated to the pro game, but I feel like the organization would probably like to see him maybe borderline dominate the AHL and then come up and be that guy who can produce at the NHL level at a very good clip. Not a guy who's going to put up like 30 points and you're like somewhat okay with it, right? Somebody's going to come in and be a real impact player and a point producer for them, which I think that he can be, but it's just something that he has to continue to progress. So I'm very high on him and I would love to see him in the NHL sooner rather than later, but it wouldn't be such a bad thing if he, were pushed not necessarily to the side, but to the AHL for one more year to continue his development.
But I mean, Blues fans, what's your thoughts? There's a lot to take in. What are your thoughts on this report? It's going to be linked down below if you want to go through all the teams as well. What is your thoughts on Granlund being linked as a player that would make perfect sense to this Blues team? What is your thoughts on Dvorsky, his development? Where do you think he plays next year? We've seen him dominate in 45 points in 61 games. Do you think he makes the club right out of a camp, or do you think he gets more development time in the AHL? Let us know down below. Let us know if you want more Blues content. We see you guys commenting constantly, so you guys deserve this as well. So go down and leave a comment, leave a like, subscribe, share this with your friends. We'll be back in another episode, so keep your eye out for that. But I've been your host, Mark, with my co-host, Darius, and take care.